Congress trial, even after former Trump advisor Steve Bannon changed his mind about cooperating. Plus, Bannon's threat to go, quote, medieval in the criminal trial. Just back from the Middle East, the White House is expressing optimism about Saudi Arabia's willingness to churn out more oil and lower prices at the pump. We'll ask Admiral John Kirby about the president's meeting with Prince Mohammed bin Salman. And from missed red flag warnings to poor Wi-Fi, preventing school staff to get emergency updates. A 77-page report commissioned by the state legislature offering new details about the more than 300 officers who failed to confront the school shooter at Robb Elementary in Uvalde, Texas. Plus, Vice President Kamala Harris using a speech at the 113th NAACP National Convention to defend abortion and voting rights, the latter of which the administration promised to prioritize from day one. More on what she's laying out for Democrats' plans for the upcoming midterms. And later this hour, he's a Democratic senator representing a state Donald Trump won by a 40-point margin. But Joe Manchin's refusal to support President Biden's domestic agenda has fellow Democrats accusing him of being out of step with what most Americans want. But we begin with the criminal trial of Steve Bannon. The former White House strategist is on trial for defying subpoenas from the January 6th House Committee. Bannon faces 2 counts of contempt of Congress, and it was a marathon jury screening process on Monday. Each juror questioned by the judge individually outside the presence of other jurors. They were asked if they were familiar with the January 6th committee or with Steve Bannon himself. Some acknowledged hearing or reading about the case, but Bannon's defense lawyers had alleged some of the pretrial publicity could inflame and bias jurors. Some jurors were also asked about their political leanings and whether they'd be able to remain objective. Sadie Gurman and Elena Treen join me now. Sadie is Justice Department reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and Elena is a congressional reporter at Axios. Sadie, let's begin with you. So Bannon cited executive privilege at one point to avoid testifying to this January 6th committee, despite not working for the Trump administration since 2017. Then he said he'd be willing to talk to the committee. Why is the case moving forward if he's now willing to talk?
Well, this offer, this sort of last-minute 11th hour offer to testify before the committee did absolutely nothing to move prosecutors. And if it moved them in any particular direction, it was, unfavorable to Bannon. They said that, this doesn't change the calculus, that the crime was committed when he refused to testify and provide documents the first time, and that the case should proceed ahead as planned. And that is what's happening. The judge in this case has kept them on a very tight schedule and has limited some of the defenses that Bannon can raise. So, this is really pulling out all the stops to try to delay this, but it hasn't worked.
Well, the committee's got a lot of things going on right now beyond Steve Bannon's testimony. We know they're investigating those deleted Secret Service text messages from January 5th and January 6th, 2021, that the Secret Service has indicated were erased as part of a scheduled phone upgrade. Does it seem likely the committee actually gets those messages?
Well, tomorrow is the deadline for the Secret Service to produce those messages. They've promised that they would, put them together and meet that deadline, but it remains to be seen. The Secret Service has said that while some of the text messages from this time period were deleted, it is said that none of the text messages that the Inspector General wanted for its January 6th investigation have been compromised. So I guess tomorrow will be really, the deadline to kind of see what they have and what they're able to share with the committee.
Feels like the committee is trying to call their bluff, Sadie, that you're saying that none of the pertinent messages were deleted, then give us the messages.
Right. Well, I think the committee has expressed some frustration with what they view as sort of competing allegations, both from the Inspector General and from the Secret Service in this case. And they just want to know what they have, what the Secret Service has. It is a pretty conspicuous date to be missing text messages, regardless of the reason. The Secret Service, as you noted, is playing a critical role in the January 6th committee's investigation and in its testimony that we've heard so far. So the committee is rightfully sort of angry that, they can't seem to get a straight answer from either side. And so tomorrow will be a test of that.
Elaine, I want to shift to you as the president comes back from that Mideast trip with some sagging approval ratings and a significant setback to what he'd hoped would be a big piece of his domestic agenda, now that West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin has defected on part of that agenda. What are Democrats hoping to pass before the summer session ends with such little time left, and will that factor into their midterm message
Yeah, well, they don't have a lot that they can, put forward right now with those sagging approval numbers. And so what they're trying to do is see what in reality they can pass. And we've been down this road with Joe Manchin before. Over the past several weeks, he's been chatting and meeting with Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer to see what, if any, parts of the broader Build Back Better package they could revive. And as of now, it looks like only a very small portion is what they're going to be aiming for. They're looking at expanding the Affordable Care Act and making sure that seniors and others can, still remain protected under those provisions, and then also looking at prescription drug prices and factoring that into a potential reconciliation package, which of course would only pass with 50 Democratic votes. It's a special budget tool that they use in the Senate, very wonky, but something that's very helpful to Democrats right now as they have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House, and they only need a simple majority in the Senate to get this done. Other provisions that they're looking at is also trying to revive some sort of what they're calling the USICA bill. It's the Chinese Competitive Act that they're using, to look at potentially combating competitiveness with China. And it looks like even though that bill passed last year in the Senate, they're trying to find a way to compromise now with the House, as well as broader Republicans. And it looks like they'll only be able to get a smaller portion of that bill as well, just the CHIPS part, which is really looking at helping invest in the semiconductor industry and supply chain issues, which is a huge issue right now within the country. And a lot of people think that that bill could help, tamp down inflation, which has recently reached 9.1%.
Well, Elena, you've also been reporting on the former president's first trip back here to Washington since his presidency ended. It's a big trip, could be a big moment. What can you tell us about it?
Well, it's a big deal. I mean, the former president has not been back in D.C. since he left office. So he's coming back to Washington on July 26th. That's next Tuesday. And he's delivering the keynote address at the America First Policy Institute's two-day retreat. So he'll be closing that out on Tuesday afternoon. And he comes at a really tough time. I mean, we're in the middle of the January 6th hearings. We've just been discussing that in this interview. They're having their potential final hearing on Thursday in prime time. But those hearings could be extended if the committee has more information. And it's really a politically volatile time for Donald Trump. It also comes as a lot of polls and Republican primary voters are saying that they're not so sure they want him as a potential nominee in 2024, and many have been pledging to actually abandon him if he does choose to run. So it's interesting to see. He'll be back with a lot of his friends and allies, many people who are in his administration, many of his cabinet members, some people in the House and the Senate, Republicans, who will be there alongside him during that two-day retreat and for his speech. And so I know many people are eager to meet with him after he hasn't been here for such a long time.
Timing's interesting. If the Steve Bannon trial goes a little longer, maybe a little longer than expected, could be the same day as a verdict in the Steve Bannon trial for former President Trump's first visit to D.C. Elena Treen, Sadie Gurman, thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you.
President Biden is back in Washington after his trip to the Middle East. Mr. Biden says he told the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia he believed him personally responsible for the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi. A top Saudi official says he didn't hear the confrontation, but the president says the official's account isn't true. For more, let's bring in National Security Council Coordinator for Strategic Communication, Admiral John Kirby. Admiral Kirby, thanks for the time. Apart from Saudi Arabia opening up its airspace to Israeli flights, what did President Biden get out of this visit to Saudi Arabia?
Well, before I talk about some specific deliverables, let me just say how important it was for the president to make this trip at this particular time. We have enormous interest in the Middle East, and the president was very clear that one of the reasons he went was to make sure that we are working towards a more integrated, more stable, more secure Middle East. So to that end, you mentioned the airspace. That is not an insignificant move by the Saudis to open up their airspace to Israeli aircraft. That's historic. We also were able to get approval for the removal of peacekeepers from the Tehran Islands and the Red Sea. They've been there since 1978, including American troops. They're no longer going to have to be there. And that is all a nice positive sign towards more integration, more cooperation, perhaps maybe even steps towards normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia. In addition to that, $3 billion dedicated by the Gulf Cooperation Council for the president's partnership for global investment and infrastructure around the world. That's going to be a huge plug to that program. We were able to reaffirm our commitment to Israel's defense security. We had terrific discussions on energy security and food security. And you heard the president talk Friday night about the potential for more oil production coming out of OPEC in perhaps as short as just a couple of weeks.
What do you make of the Saudi kingdom's differing account on that conversation about Jamal Khashoggi?
Well, the foreign minister, if you look at what he said he did not hear that part of the conversation. The president absolutely said what he told the American people, he said, about Jamal Khashoggi's killing and about his belief and who was responsible for that. The president stands by his account. The foreign minister of Saudi Arabia said he didn't hear it, and maybe he didn't. But that doesn't mean that President Biden didn't actually say it. And I would add, more critically, that the very first agenda item on the president's list when he sat down with the Crown Prince and other Saudi officials was Jamal Khashoggi. Mentioned him by name, first thing on the list, as well as other human rights concerns that we have with Saudi Arabia. It was the very first item on the president's agenda.
Well, the president also discussed the possibility of Iran returning to the nuclear deal, which former President Trump pulled out of. Right. So where do the American and the Saudi interests align on that issue with Iran?
Actually, we're quite aligned. I mean, the Saudi Arabia doesn't want to see a nuclear-armed Iran either, and they absolutely don't want that to be an outcome. Look, we both recognize that no problem in the Middle East, none, is easier to solve with Iran having a nuclear weapon. President Biden believes that the best way to prevent that outcome is through diplomacy, through a negotiated settlement. There is a deal on the table right now, Scott, and it's up to the Iranians now to take that deal and to work towards that outcome. If they want to see sanctions relief, then it's right before them. All they have to do is comply with the deal that's on the table right now. If they don't, then President Biden made it very clear that we're going to work with allies and partners in the region and in Europe to increase the pressure on Iran, at the same time making sure that we have the appropriate military capability in the region to defend our national security interests.
What's less clear to me is what that means. Apply more pressure if they don't take the deal. How and when and how quickly can you apply pressure on Iran?
It could be through additional sanctions, for sure. I mean, there's lots of different ways we could do this, but I think certainly we're not going to take additional sanctions off the table or strengthen any ones that are frankly in place already.
I want to move on to Ukraine. President Zelensky announced the firing of two top aides, two highly placed aides, his security chief, his longtime friend, Ivan Bakhanov, and the prosecutor general, Irina Venediktova, over the charges that their subordinates were collaborating with Russian intelligence. What more can you tell us about the possible consequences of that type of cooperation?
I don't think there's going to be any consequences for cooperation between the United States and Ukraine, or quite frankly, so many other nations that are helping Ukraine with their security assistance needs. We're going to stay dedicated to that. And you're going to see announcements coming from the administration in coming days and weeks of additional security assistance materials to help Ukraine better defend itself. President Zelensky is the head of state. He gets to make these decisions. We're certainly in no position to question his judgment when it comes to the kind of leaders he wants around him. We're obviously always careful about the intelligence that we share. We want to make sure that that information stays confidential. But we're not worried that in these decisions it's going to affect our support to Ukraine going forward.
Well, Russia is ordering its forces to target some of the long-range missiles and artillery provided by the U.S. and by the other NATO nations to Ukraine. How might that change the administration's plans or the Pentagon's plans to keep supplying and what to supply to the Ukrainian forces?
Those Russian assertions are not going to change, again, the support that we're giving to Ukraine going forward. I want to stress that we're doing these security assistance packages in almost real time, Scott. We want to make sure that we are providing things to Ukraine that are relevant to them in the fight that they're in right now. And right now in the Donbass, it's what we call a long-range fires fight. They need distance and separation from Russian forces. And so the longer the range on the weapon systems we can give them, the artillery, the advanced rocket systems, the better it is for the Ukrainians. And they are using these advanced rocket systems quite effectively. I mean, they're hitting targets deep inside Russian lines, and it's having an effect on the battlefield.
Admiral John Kirby on the White House North Lawn. Thank you, Admiral, for the time.
My pleasure, Scott.
A 77-page report on the deadly Uvalde school shooting, detailing several systemic failures in the police response. Why investigators are blaming both state and federal law enforcement for a failure to stop a gunman from killing 19 students and 2 teachers. Plus, a jury set to decide whether the Parkland, Florida school shooter who left 17 people dead will be given the death penalty or sent to prison. The latest on his sentencing trial is ahead. You're streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, and sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Norah O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers? They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Norah O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
A report into the deadly Uvalde, Texas school shooting outlines a series of failures by multiple law enforcement agencies. Surveillance video from inside Robb Elementary was released alongside the report. The footage you're about to see may be considered disturbing to some viewers. The Committee of Texas state lawmakers highlighted a lack of urgency and leadership by those involved in the response to the attack that killed 21 people. Hundreds of law enforcement officers were at the scene of the shooting, but waited more than an hour to confront the attacker. That's just one of the findings from this 77-page report. For more on it, let's bring in Zach Despard. He covers politics for the Texas Tribune. Zach, we appreciate your time. We know Uvalde's acting police chief, Lieutenant Mariano Pargas, was placed on active leave just after this report came out. What were the reasons given for that?
Good evening, Scott. As you had outlined, this is the most comprehensive recount to date of the shooting at Robb Elementary on May 24th and the police response to it. The mayor of Uvalde, in announcing that this officer, this commander being put on leave, did not give specific reasons for it, but the report outlines severe incompetence and hesitancy on the behalf of police from a number of different agencies including the Uvalde police, and responding to that scene. Of course, it underscores the finding that police, after initially engaging the shooter, when they quickly arrived at the school, they were shot at, they were treated, and instead of regrouping and immediately going after that suspect again, they waited for more than an hour before going back into that classroom and killing that gunman.
The previous reports had blamed Uvalde's school's police chief, Pete Arredondo, and his failure in his role as incident commander. Did the 77-page report come to that same conclusion?
What was significant about this report is that it cast a far wider net in terms of who is to blame for the flawed police response. Yes, plenty of the reporting and the accountability to date has been about school's police chief, Pete Arredondo, and his failures as the incident commander of the scene. However, this report lays out all the different law enforcement that responded to this scene. 5 officers were from Arredondo's department, 91 were from the state police, and 150 were from the U.S. Border Patrol. The committee that wrote this report found that those better equipped agencies, the state police and the federal police, had opportunities when they saw that Arredondo was not acting like the on-scene commander, was not taking charge, to take charge themselves, and they did not do so.
Now, the report's criticizing law enforcement, but also criticizing the school itself in this. What did it find there?
An entire section of the report is devoted to the physical security limitations and failures of Robb Elementary itself. The school was built in the 1950s. It is an aging facility. There was documentation of number of doors and locks that weren't working. It specifically noted that the door through which police believe the shooter entered the classroom, that interior door, had been reported to school administrators as malfunctioning, that the lock was not working properly, and yet there was no documentation that any work was done to repair that door. More broadly, there was described a culture of teachers, administrators, custodial staff propping up doors, propping them open, not properly locking them as they're supposed to, and the administrators, the school police, not doing a good enough job of ensuring that teachers, according to their policy, always keep those doors locked.
Are the officials or the families of the victims still criticizing lack of transparency by police? Now we have this big report that provides a lot of revelations.
Yes, this report is comprehensive. It is a big step forward in terms of transparency. However, for example, some families are frustrated that we don't actually have the voluminous investigative materials upon which this report is based. Some of the other body cam footage, some of the internal communication, some of the 911 calls, the actual interviews for this committee were done behind closed doors. We don't have those transcripts yet. So there is a much more that the public officials can do to let the community know all of the information they had upon which they base these conclusions in terms of the flawed police response and the failures of school authorities as well.
Still learning a lot more, still more to learn from here. Zach Despart's in Texas. Zach, thank you for joining us. The gunman in 2018's Parkland, Florida school shooting returned to court today for the penalty phase of his case. Jurors will decide whether he's sentenced to death or life in prison without parole for the attack that killed 17 people. CBS's Ted Scouten has the story.
The murders were cold, calculated, and premeditated.
Florida prosecutors began their opening statements using Parkland shooter Nicholas Cruz's own words from a social media post against him.
This is what the defendant said. Hello, my name is Nick. I'm going to be the next school shooter of 2018.
Legal experts say that premeditation will be tough for the defense to overcome.
Not only did this young man plan it and think about it and act it out in a manner that is consistent with someone who's planned it and thought about it, but he actually posted 2 videos on social media describing exactly what he's going to do.
Cruz, now 23, pleaded guilty to killing 17 people in the 2018 massacre at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School, but his defense team is contesting his sentence.
They are trying to focus on any kind of a mental condition that he had, short of rendering him insane.
The case has faced repeated delays due to the pandemic, legal wranglings, and the lengthy process of trying to find 12 jurors out of a pool of more than 1,000 people. But now, the families are finally getting their day in court.
I have my feelings of what I hope happens at this trial.
This is Linda Beagle-Schulman's first time being in the same room as her son Scott's murderer.
Sitting in the courtroom quietly and keeping my emotions to myself is probably going to be very difficult.
Families will see and hear disturbing images and videos during this penalty phase, which is expected to last 4 months. For the gunman to get life in prison, the defense team only needs to convince one juror to spare his life. Ted Scouten, CBS News, Fort Lauderdale.
Officials are uncovering more information about a mass shooting at an Indiana mall that killed 3 people and injured 2 more. Police say the gunman was fatally shot on scene by an armed bystander. Skylar Henry has more on the investigation.
Police say a man helped prevent an even larger tragedy when he shot and killed a gunman who opened fire inside the food court of the Greenwood Park Mall in Indiana late Sunday afternoon.
We're very thankful for a young 22-year-old man who stopped this violent act. This young man, Greenwood's Good Samaritan, acted within seconds, stopping the shooter and saving countless lives.
Police say the suspect, 20-year-old Jonathan Sapirman, walked to the mall from his home armed with 2 rifles he legally purchased in March from a local store, a handgun and hundreds of rounds of ammunition. He only used 1 rifle during the shooting, killing a married couple and a 30-year-old man, and injuring a 22-year-old woman and a 12-year-old girl. Within 2 minutes of him firing, the Good Samaritan, identified as Eliza Dickin, had shot and killed him.
He engaged the gunman from quite a distance with a handgun, was very proficient in that, very tactically sound, and as he moved to close in on the suspect, he was also motioning for people to exit behind him.
Police say Dickin was at the mall, shopping with his girlfriend. He legally owned his handgun, which he fired 10 times at the suspect.
Many more people would have died last night if not for a responsible armed citizen that took action very quickly.
Police say they don't have a motive for the shooting. The gunman had no police record as an adult, but was convicted of minor crimes as a juvenile. Skylar Henry, CBS News.
Another critical primary is set for tomorrow, the latest in a march to the midterm elections. And while Democrats outnumber Republicans 2-1, they've failed to win one governorship for nearly 8 years. The latest on that and other down-ballot races. Plus, former Vice President Mike Pence is joining with Arizona's outgoing Republican governor to support a successor. Who it is and why it once again puts him at odds with former President Trump. You're streaming CBS News.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
when weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging wind.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it. We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
Welcome back to Red and Blue. Here's a look at some of our top stories. The report about the mass shooting at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, is calling attention to a number of failures. Specifically, it called out state and federal law enforcement agencies for failing to take over command response from the much smaller and less experienced school district police force. Plus, jury selection has begun in the contempt trial of former Trump advisor Steve Bannon. A judge says the proceedings will continue as scheduled, despite Bannon changing his mind about cooperating with the House committee investigating January 6th. And the number of reported U.S. monkeypox cases has surpassed 1,800. States are now struggling to keep up with the demand for vaccines as the number of new infections rises. Former Vice President Mike Pence has once again positioned himself at odds with former President Trump in a political proxy fight. Pence has joined Arizona's outgoing Republican Governor Doug Ducey in choosing Karen Taylor Robson to succeed him. Mr. Trump's endorsement is for Kari Lake, who has continued to argue without proof the 2020 presidential election was somehow stolen. This is the second time in recent weeks the former Veep has chosen to back a candidate that's different than his former bosses. Joining me now for more, CBS News political director Finn Gomez. Hey, Finn, does this represent a larger split in the party or just a narrow split between these two?
As you said, Scott, in this battleground state of Arizona, the former President Donald Trump has endorsed Kari Lake in this gubernatorial fight. The former local TV anchor who has embraced the false claims that the 2020 presidential election was stolen, while his former vice president, Mike Pence, has backed Karen Taylor Robson, once again pinning the two against each other in what is becoming, as you said, a proxy primary war over endorsements. Both Trump and Pence will be in the Grand Canyon State this Friday, campaigning for the respective candidates. Pence is going to be making campaign stops across the state, while Trump will be holding a rally for Lake in Prescott Valley, Arizona. While these candidates were running for their midterm seats, Trump and Pence are also represent a split in the Republican Party. One top Republican consultant tells me Trump and his MAGA base are focused on relitigating the 2020 election, while Pence and some of the other potential 2024 Republican contenders are focused on the future of the party. Trump is still very much in the driving seat, though. Scott, while recent polls show his support slipping, he still maintains a wide lead over other possible presidential competitors, including Pence.
A quick follow-up on that. Do we have a sense of who's favored? Ms. Robson, Mr. Pence's choice, or Ms. Lake, Mr. Trump's choice?
It's close. It's actually close. Lake has been the front runner for most of the race, but recent polls show that Taylor Robson's making it up and catching up quickly. So it's going to be tight. It's going to be a close race, it looks like, and we expect that to be one of the top and most interesting races on August 2nd.
The close races are also often the most expensive races. Now, Lake has been criticized for these election claims you referenced, that the 2020 election was stolen.
Right.
Is that hurting or helping in a state Joe Biden won?
Frankly, it's helping. In this battleground state of Arizona, in the primary battle here, it's helping her. It's helped fueled her from a newcomer. She is a political newcomer, a former local TV anchor, and it's helped propel her candidacy to one. It also helped secure her the endorsement of former President Donald Trump, and she could actually now she goes from newcomer to potential winner on August 2nd. And so, yes, it has helped fuel her rise and helped fuel her campaign.
It's amazing the coinciding of the map here. These big governor's races, these big Senate races are in Arizona, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, the very states that decided 2020. Finn Gomez, thanks so much.
Crucial states. Thanks, Scott.
Georgia Congressman Jody Hice has been subpoenaed to testify before a state grand jury investigating former President Trump and his efforts to overturn the 2020 election in that state. The Republican is scheduled to appear before a grand jury in Atlanta tomorrow, but his lawyers are trying to have the matter quashed in federal court. Hice was one of several GOP lawmakers who attended a December 2020 meeting at the White House where Trump allies discussed ways to overturn Joe Biden's electoral win. Several high-ranking Georgia Republicans, including Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger, have already testified. Pivotal primaries tomorrow in multiple states, particularly in Maryland. Democrats typically have an edge in Maryland, so the winners tomorrow could be strong favorites in several races come November. It's typically true, but not always. In 2014, Republican Larry Hogan defied expectations, turned the tables, and won the gubernatorial race there. Then he managed to overwhelmingly win a second term. He's term limited, so tomorrow begins a new scramble for the nomination for both parties, and there are down-ballot races proving to be interesting as well. For more, I want to bring in Aaron Cox, a Maryland politics reporter for the Washington Post. Aaron, great to have you. First of all, there doesn't seem to be a clear favorite in the race for the nomination for governor for Democrats. Where does it stand, and who are the biggest players right now?
Right. For months, the person to get the most votes is undecided, that voters just really had largely turned out. On the Democratic side, it's kind of a statistical dead heat between 3 of the 9 people running for the nomination. You have Tom Perez, which viewers might recognize as a household name from his time as a DNC chair. You have Wes Moore, best-selling author and former nonprofit chief. And you have Peter Franchot, who has been the comptroller in Maryland for 16 years and in public office since I was learning to write my name in elementary school. So between the 3 of them, there's statistical dead heat, and there's also several other high-profile candidates that, are likely to get some of the vote too. So it's really up for grabs there.
If there's a 9-person field, is it possible 20% wins that primary?
Yeah, the candidates are looking more like 25% would probably win it, but no one's getting even remotely close to 50%. Nobody is getting anywhere close to a mandate going into November about what direction they want to lead the Democratic Party after 8 years under Republican Governor Larry Hogan. So it'll be an interesting race to see them emerge from and try to coalesce Democrats around one vision when they weren't really offering one vision at all, or even 2 alternatives in the primary. They've been offering 9 alternatives.
Now, I interjected before you're going to give us a sense of the Republican field. It's much smaller. Is it more clear who the favorite is?
It is much smaller, but it is still a statistical dead heat. And it's kind of between a candidate that Larry Hogan has endorsed and kind of is a pragmatic conservative who kind of built a whole brand around trying to appeal to Democrats and independents, because that's how you get elected as a Republican in Maryland. On the other side, you have Dan Cox, no relation, by the way, who is a Trump-endorsed candidate, has embraced a lot of the Make America Great Again rhetoric. He talks a lot about things like preventing transgender athletes from participating in women's sports. And so Maryland voters really have a clear choice about whether they want, which direction they want to take the Republican Party. Do they want to embrace Trump, or do they want to embrace Larry Hogan's type of pragmatic conservatism? And depending on who wins, it depends on how competitive the election will be in November.
That seems complicated in Maryland, uniquely, because If Larry Hogan can sustain 8 years as a popular governor, presumably his chosen candidate might have the best odds. If Dan Cox, the Trump-endorsed candidate, were to win the nomination, do the political observers in Annapolis think Dan Cox could conceivably win statewide?
No, I mean, we're talking about a state where Trump got 33% of the vote against Joe Biden's 66% of the vote. I don't think there's any political observer, except perhaps Dan Cox himself, who thinks that he could win in November if he pulls the win out on Tuesday. But, politics, it's not over till the election's done. So, maybe Maryland voters will have a different say come November, but the general consensus is that it'd be a really uphill climb for Dan Cox if he emerges from tomorrow's primary as the winner.
So it doesn't feel like at all a bellwether for many other parts of America. That notwithstanding, Aaron, what down ballot races are you watching and may have some impact or some importance?
Right, so Maryland Democrats really need to decide what kind of party they're going to be. And like Democrats across the country, they're kind of having some jitters about, with Biden's approval rating really low and kind of not having a clear direction of where the party goes from here. So Montgomery County, which is a suburb of D.C., where many D.C. power brokers live and raise their families, has a very competitive county executive race that could go further to the left. Or otherwise, there's also a attorney general's race and a comptroller's race, which kind of helps determine the way that the state's governed in Annapolis.
Well, with the U.S. House on the line in November, I asked this question for every local reporter, but Maryland's congressional delegation is all up. The U.S. House members are all up this year. It's been pretty consistent in Maryland, the party breakdown, all but one U.S. House member, a Democrat. Is that likely to change, possibly going to change this year?
Maryland had some of the most gerrymandered congressional districts in the country, and they tried to push through another set after redistricting, and a judge wouldn't let them. So the districts have been recently redrawn, and some of them are slightly more competitive that make it slightly more likely that a Republican could emerge as a winner in November. Whether or not the Republican Party chooses to nominate someone that Democrats want to vote for in the general election is a different story.
Aaron Cox, got a big day tomorrow. Thanks for giving us time on Preview Day, looking ahead to Maryland primaries. We appreciate it.
Of course. Have a good day.
Democratic congressional leaders are moving forward with what's left of a tax and climate spending plan after Senator Joe Manchin is once again derailing part of the president's domestic agenda. Why Democrats are bowing to the West Virginia senator's demands and what's left in the scaled back package. You're streaming Red and Blue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming Gender.
I did not realize that you could change your gender.
Realizing how you feel.
You can be a boy, sometimes you feel like a girl, sometimes you feel like both.
Redefining who you are.
Identify as trans.
Gender fluid.
Non-binary and queer.
Is the idea of gender a thing of the past?
And to be yourself, always, no matter what anyone says, I love you.
Are the kids all right? Gender. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
when weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail. We're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
People from every corner of America facing challenges.
Everyone is just looking for some type of connection.
Just raise your hand and say, hey, I'd like to help.
Coming together to find solutions.
We are going to do something about it.
Their stories are our stories.
Welcome to Eye on America.
Stream now on the free CBS News app.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me?
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Stories that inform, inspire, and brighten your day.
I've been waiting patiently for something like this.
Make every day a little more like Sunday morning.
Here comes the sun.
Stream on the free CBS News app Tuesday mornings.
More than 1,800 cases of monkeypox have been reported across the United States. Health officials believe the actual number of cases is likely higher due to a lack of tracking and testing. States are also now struggling to provide monkeypox vaccines to address the growing number of infections. Former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb told CBS's Face the Nation more preventative measures must be taken.
We made a lot of the same mistakes that we made with COVID with this, having a very narrow case definition, not having enough testing early enough, not deploying vaccine in an aggressive fashion to ring vaccinate. But now this is firmly embedded in the community.
Monkeypox is mainly transmitted through skin-to-skin contact. Symptoms include fever, fatigue, and painful skin lesions. There have been no reported deaths from the virus in the U.S., and patients typically recover within 2 to 4 weeks. Democratic congressional leaders are facing the political reality of a severely slimmed-down climate and tax plan after Democratic West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin said he wouldn't back a more substantial package. The senator said he'll only support legislation that lowers prescription drug prices and extends subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. It's not the first time Manchin has played the role of spoiler to President Biden's agenda. Democratic Congressman Don Beyer of Virginia said, quote, whatever subset of Build Back Better that he'll agree to, we will accept. My teammate, CBS News congressional correspondent Nicole Killian is with me now. So, Nicole, what, if anything, is left in this bill?
Well, not much. You know, it's certainly a far cry from that initial massive $3.5 trillion package known as Build Back Better. And obviously, after that original package was scuttled late last year, in large part due to West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin, Democratic leaders more specifically had been in talks with Senator Manchin on a narrower package. So at this point, what it's been whittled down to, again, is a bill that would, in essence, help to lower the cost of prescription drugs, which has been a top priority for Democrats, and also extend subsidies under the Affordable Care Act, something they want to get done before the summer is out, simply because those new premium increases could be announced next month. So that being said, that's kind of what's left on the table at this point after Senator Manchin said that he wasn't willing to go along with some other provisions dealing with climate and tax loopholes.
One of his sharpest critics consistently in the caucus is Senator Bernie Sanders, who says Manchin's position is at odds with the majority of not just his party, but of Americans. What's he basing that on?
Yeah, well, that's been a long-standing concern of the senator who has called out West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin before. But, you know, look, what many Democrats, especially progressives, argue is that, you know, this is the president's agenda in terms of, you know, dealing with climate, in terms of dealing with issues like child care and time. And again, they feel like Senator Manchin is really standing in the way of the president's broader agenda, and that, in essence, you know, that's kind of hurting the Democratic Party and agenda as a whole. And that is, people obviously voted for Joe Biden, so they argue that they should be delivering on components of his agenda, not just some slimmed down package. And so that is kind of the back and forth, the push and pull that we saw earlier in this debate when that initial Build Back Better bill was, being negotiated, because again, you saw progressives really kind of embrace. At one point, they wanted this bill to be as much as $6 trillion. And then, slowly we saw that package get whittled down. So again, that is a key argument that we have heard time and again from progressives, that they just feel that Senator Manchin is not willing to go along with Democrats' broader agenda and is standing in the way.
According to the people with whom you're speaking, what impact is Manchin's hold on this agenda going to have on the midterm elections?
Well, look, I mean, in Senator Manchin's defense, and he told reporters as much today, he is mostly concerned about inflation here when it comes to the size and scope of this package. That's in part why he said he couldn't go along with it back in December of last year. And then once again, now he again wanted to kind of hold off in terms of some of the discussions until he saw some of the latest inflation figures. And I mean, obviously, inflation is a key concern, not just for Democrats, but certainly we know Republicans have seized overwhelmingly on this issue and don't feel that the Biden administration has done enough to keep it in check. So, that's what Senator Manchin says. And as far as why he is not willing to go along with a broader package at this time, he says he just doesn't feel it makes sense to pour, necessarily trillions of dollars into the economy at a time where it's already overheated.
Well, let's turn to that financial aid package for the semiconductor industry, CHIPS. We've been talking about that for a while. What do we know about the bill and whatever support it might have among Republicans?
Oh, well, again, this is another instance where we're seeing Congress kind of pare back on its agenda. I mean, this actually was a bipartisan bill aimed at boosting competition with China. And again, we saw lawmakers from both the House and the Senate conference over this bill. And kind of once they were having some difficulties and not able to get to full agreement in that conference process, well, now we are seeing them try to parcel things out from this legislation. So at this point, kind of what is surviving is what's considered a chips-only package that would provide about $52 billion in support for the semiconductor industry, because, as you know, these semiconductor chips are essential. They're in automobiles, they're in your phones, they're in so many devices that we use today. And so because of a number of issues, we have seen, with the supply chain in light of this semiconductor chip shortage. So this is really aimed at trying to provide support to this industry, which again provides a critical product for a number of everyday items that we use.
They want to get that done before this summer, August recess. What else do Democrats think they have to get done, must get done before the recess?
Oh, well, certainly that is a key one. They would like to get that done. Additionally, in terms of the reconciliation package that we discussed, they would like to get that done as well before the summer break, again, because those health care premiums could potentially go up. And even we learned that it's possible the House might have to come back next month if this measure eventually wins support in the Senate. But look, one big thing that we are tracking is just this continued response that we are seeing in Congress right now to the decision by the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade. So we already saw the House, for instance, just last week pass legislation once again to try to codify abortion rights into law, even though it probably won't go anywhere in the Senate. But even this week, we will see them take up other measures that would codify, for instance, marriage equality protections into law, as well as contraceptive protections into law. And so while, again, most of those bills may not necessarily clear the Senate in terms of the House, this is really about messaging, which will give some of these members some talking points to discuss over the course of that summer recess.
Democrats are racing against the clock, but they have their leader back. Chuck Schumer back from his COVID absence on the floor today. Nicole Killian, thank you so much.
You bet.
We're going to take a quick break, which means in the meantime, you have a couple of minutes to download the free CBS News app on all your devices. You can catch live local coverage from across the country from all of our CBS stations. And while you're at it, check out Paramount Plus. We've got a mountain of content for you to stream there as well, including your favorite shows, movies, and sports.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming the internet.
Technology is baked into the DNA of our generation.
Social media, apps, and games.
I like my iPad, my phone, my Nintendo.
Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, it's one click away.
Is growing up digital a blessing or a curse?
There is so much pressure to be perfect.
We need to have conversations regarding healthier usage.
Are the kids all right? The internet, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When weather is about to get extreme.
We're talking about hail, we're talking about tornadoes, damaging winds.
Every second counts.
Let's now take a look at what that really means to you.
That's why CBS News and the Weather Channel have come together to bring you virtual weather technology so advanced, so real.
We can show you what it's going to look like when the storms come through.
You'll see what will happen, where it will happen, before it does. Feel the forecast on CBS News. Time to get prepared.
I'm Nora O'Donnell in our nation's capital. We're here at the White House with the President of the United States.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
We've never done an interview like this before.
That's correct.
Tonight, a congressional investigation sparked by reporting from CBS News. What's your message to consumers?
They need help now. Tell him I feel it.
The CBS Evening News with Nora O'Donnell from Washington, D.C. on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
We will witness yet another moment in history.
We have an inspiring story that started with a strange act of kindness.
Yeah. We found it.
You're kidding me!
We got it.
We share stories that lift you up and brighten your day.
The Uplift. Stream on the free CBS News app.
Britain's Prince Harry and his wife Meghan visited the United Nations this morning to honor the life and legacy of Nelson Mandela. The Duke of Sussex praised the South African for his leadership and perseverance while enduring 27 years of captivity. Prince Harry also called on leaders to take action, saying the world is, quote, witnessing a global assault on democracy and freedom. Citing the pandemic, climate change, and war in Ukraine, Prince Harry called 2022 a painful year in a painful decade. Dr. Anthony Fauci says he plans to retire by the end of President Biden's current term. The 81-year-old serves as the president's chief medical advisor and has been the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and has been so for decades. Dr. Fauci reportedly doesn't have a specific date in mind, but told CNN he won't be here past January 2025. And that does it for today. You can stream Red and Blue Monday to Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern. And a reminder, if you want to watch previous episodes of the program, you can see them anytime on the CBS News website. Just head to cbsnews.com/redandblue.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS. Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday Morning.
You ready? A generation of kids opens up on CBS Reports.
I just want to be like a regular kid.
Their world, their struggles, their voices.
What if I was white?
A lot of people like to call names and make you feel ashamed for being proud of who you are.
Now streaming racism.
I feel like it's just a war zone between all different races.
Will this generation continue the problem?
The kids pushed them away and didn't want them to be there because of their race.
Or be the solution?
We just need to keep raising our voices. We're all human and we don't deserve that type of treatment just because of how we look.
Are the kids all right? Racism, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Want to go someplace new? Yeah, you do.
See something new.
Learn something new.
Meet someone new. Nate B in the house.
There's always something new under the sun.
CBS Mornings, weekdays.
CBS News Sunday Morning with Jane Pauley on CBS.
Nearly half of America's murderers are walking free. Why? CBS News is finding out using the power of our local and national investigative journalists across the country. Crime without punishment. See it all on CBSNews.com.
Welcome. You're streaming CBS News. I'm John Dickerson. Thank you for joining us for the hour. Here's a look at the top stories we are following at the moment. A new report details failure after failure in the law enforcement response to the mass shooting at the elementary school in Uvalde, Texas. Plus, footage from police body cameras is made public. We're on the ground in Uvalde with the latest. An armed citizen stops a deadly shooting at a mall in Indiana over the weekend, but not before 3 people were killed and 2 were injured. What we're learning about the alleged gunman and the man who shot him.